Hello and welcome to episode 48 of Gar Borras' Time Machine. How you doing today, Gar? Today we're going to be doing a real fun one. Today we're going to be looking back on the classic Don Knott movie, The Incredible Mr. Limpet, and I found out quite a few interesting things. So you were sharing as we were posting that we're going to do this today online that this brings back a lot of childhood memories. So why don't we let you take it away and tell us why this film brings back such happy memories for you?
Well, I imagine, in 1964 when the movie came out.
Yeah.
I was 8 years old.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
I'm in the middle of when in childhood, when you're 8 years old, your capacity for fantasy and all of that stuff is, at an all-time high. You know what I mean?
Sure.
When the movie came out, we look back at it nowadays, and we don't really think much of it, because technology is like so advanced, and everything that went into making Mr. Limpet is so rudimentary compared to the technology that exists nowadays. But in 1964, it was very groundbreaking. I think I don't know if it is the first, but it's the first of my experience of a movie where they were infusing film with animation. Things like that, and which really, we don't think much of it now, but back in 1964, it was a brand new thing, which was a stunning thing for the public, because up until that point, I don't think people had really seen a movie where they were combining the two.
Yeah.
It really, if it is the first of that, then it started a whole genre to follow.
I mean, in a word, as you say, groundbreaking is a word. And what's funny, like so many of these episodes we do, whether we're talking about an old classic TV show or a classic movie like this, well, a classic movie now, all these years later, is that at the time when the film was released in 1964, I was reading that many of the critics at the time panned it. And I'm thinking for very much the reasons you just stated, that maybe a lot of those critics at the time didn't think it was, this is a cartoon movie. What is this? This is a joke movie. But it has really stood, like many of the movies we've talked about in the history of this show, it has really stood the test of time. And from what I know, I think this was the first of those films, because as far as I know, and stuff we've talked about, I remember talking about the classic 1933 King Kong movie, and that was maybe the first film where they kind of used live action animation, and even a movie like King Kong. But you look at The Incredible Mr. Limpet, the animation's a lot more obvious. Even from 1933 to 1964, look at how the technology and filmmaking had advanced at that time.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. King Kong, but the difference is
obvious.
King Kong was not
animated,
was not making it obvious.
Yeah.
And in truth, when I was watching King Kong as a young boy, I couldn't tell
exactly
that, it was animation. It was done so well, and especially for a time that was so many decades before Mr. Limpet. So you can imagine how limited the technology was at the time when they made King Kong, and the technology was more advanced when they made Mr. Limpet, but just compared to what we see nowadays, it's just a stark, drastic difference. And for people like me of my age, even at this stage of my life, you like to look back at these things.
Sure.
They're more than just a movie. They're memories. They're special memories. They're significations of points of your life. Where specific things were happening in your life. At that particular time. So looking back. Is a huge reminisce.
Sure, and Gar, another thing, you look at the evolution of animation. I mean, we talked a little bit about King Kong, and it's not as obvious because King Kong is in a cartoon; it's a motion picture. But then I remember, like, we did an episode talking about Felix the Cat, and we were surprised to find out that Felix the Cat cartoons date back to 1919, so they had animation then, but it was black and white. It looked very different. So you even compare it to like Felix the Cat or stuff like Betty Boop, or even like old Popeye commercials from the 1930s. And you look at how much by the time Mr. Limpet comes out in 19, how much animation had advanced at that point.
Yes, and I think you incidentally touched on other characters from the earlier times of animation that have still stood the test of time. I don't see an ending of the popularity of Betty Boop.
Oh yeah. I mean, you still see Betty Boop.
I still see her being popular decades from now because she has become an iconic cartoon character that that just I don't know. It's just there's certain ones that just people still accept.
I mean,
even many years removed, and so Popeye, is another one. But I see Betty Boop. I see a time where Popeye, could very well wane, but I still see Betty Boop continuing in popularity for many, many years to come.
I think there's a lot of reason for that. I mean, Betty Boop is probably, I believe we learned it was about as old as Felix the Cat, came out around the same time, I think. And honestly, Betty Boop, I think, is popular for a lot of reasons still, because even back in the day, Betty Boop was, when it first came, Betty Boop was quite risque. And so there's an element of a bit of a shock factor there. Like, I can't believe they're able to put something, I mean, it wasn't totally risque, don't get me wrong, but especially for that time.
Well, to put it in context, because you're 100% right, what we consider risque now
was really risque back then.
Makes the risque of Betty Boop seem extremely tame.
Yeah.
But when you go back to the 1920s, those risque things were like majorly risque.
Yeah. You could not believe what you were seeing on the screen or in the comic book.
But that also is the element of Betty Boop as to why she has stood the test of time is because of that risque element. It's just carried with her.
Yeah, and Gar, I was very interested to learn that while back in the 60s, many people primarily knew Don Knott, the star of this motion picture, from playing the role of Barney Fife on, of course, the Andy Griffith Show. This, of all things, was his very first motion picture. This was his first starring role, and you can tell because look at Don Knott, a very young Don Knott.
Well, he's super young, but this is him
at his best.
At the height of his popularity, because the Andy Griffith Show started in 1960, and I think it ended in 1968. So you're talking about 1964 is the halfway point, which is the apex of his popularity. He became the major star of the show, even though the show wasn't named after him.
Yeah.
When everybody was meeting at the water cooler to talk about the show, I don't think people were really talking about Andy Griffith. They were talking about Barney Fife.
In fact, the funny thing about it, Gar, if you remember when he started making movies, Don Knott, that's when he really got popular. He eventually left the Andy Griffith Show at the height of that show's success, and for years he was known as a bubbling idiot, Barney Fife. But you know what's funny? When he left the Andy Griffith Show as Andy's kind of silly, stupid sidekick, the show was not as good without him.
No, and that's what I mean.
Yeah.
The show really catapulted him to stardom, and 1964 was the apex of that stardom.
Yeah, and let's talk about Don Knotts for a minute, because everything you just said is true. But if we look at Don Knotts, he is kind of the underdog. And what I mean by that, he is not what people would... he was not a guy that is your typical movie star. Did not have stunning good looks. But he was able to make it in Hollywood because he had great comedic timing. He was a funny guy. He was able... it was about his personality. It was, more about his personality than his looks. And that's why he's one of these guys that you would always root for, because who doesn't like to see an underdog, become successful?
Great point. I mean, absolutely. Because only people that of the older generation will understand this. In the mid 1960s, movies, television, commercials, virtually everything in advertisement was all about the beautiful people.
Sure.
It was the Barbie generation. It was everything was striving to be a Barbie. You know what I mean? At that time, and that was the apex. So when you have a guy like Don Knotts, being catapulted to stardom in the middle of all of the beautiful people, what does that tell you about his talent?
It speaks volumes, and it also shows that he was somewhat of a real person. He was able to be successful in spite of maybe not being a so-called beautiful person.
Yes. And when you see a lot of behind the scenes, pictures, where he's like, nobody's even thinking about the picture. It's behind the scenes. I mean, and he's like, he had incredibly beautiful women that he was dating at the time.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing because, again, not your typical movie star, but he really had kind of great comedic timing. He had he really made it on his personality. And like you're saying, you did not hear a lot of young men saying they wanted to grow up and they wish they looked like Don Knotts. But you did hear people say, I wish I was as funny as Don Knotts. So he his career catapulted, but for different reasons than your typical Hollywood star. And that's why I think he did have such a lasting career. And what's funny, Gar, is in watching the film last night for the first time to prepare for today's episode, I hadn't seen it in many, many years. I forgot what a great film this was. I mean, I kind of seen something about it online. That's kind of what made me want to do an episode on it. But watching the film last night, it really reminded me what a great film this was. And I'm sure you've seen the movie poster of a DVD cover with Don Knotts and the fish, of Henry Limpet. And it's kind of, it dawned on me that, the fish in the movie kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you ever thought about this, Charlie the tuna that was on all those Star-Kissed tuna commercials, and I kind of
Star-Kissed tuna was using with Charlie Tuna or with that character at around the same time.
Well, here's what I never could get a confirmation that this is what it was based on, but I looked up about when Charlie Tuna was created, for the Star-Kissed commercials, and that dates back a few years before this, 19 1961. So I can't help but think maybe when they were doing the animation that they might have based it off of that.
Well, and it was that, and I remember popular Hawaiian Punch commercials.
Yeah.
Where they'd have some guy punching some guy.
Yeah.
In the commercial, and that's what that was Hawaiian Punch's.
Yeah, I remember.
First, commercials. They were actually using violence in the commercials, and it was all acceptable at that time, because we never really looked at it that way. But I have to say that back in the 1960s, I used to love Hawaiian Punch.
Oh, yeah.
It used to come in a glass bottle.
Yeah.
And you would pour it in a glass and mix it with water. And, oh, my gosh, it tasted so good as a child. And it doesn't exist anymore, and I would really like to see if somehow I might be able to find the actual recipe that they used to make Hawaiian Punch.
Yeah.
Because, man, that stuff was good back in the 60s.
Because they still have it, but I don't know if they changed their formula.
It's not the same.
Yeah. And it's funny, in doing an episode of Gar Borras' Time Machine, we're talking about like iconic cartoon characters that we'd see on different TV commercials. And it's interesting. I urge people also go check out a past episode that we did on like classic TV commercials. And I was surprised in that episode, Gar, to learn that like when we think of Frosted Flakes, I'm sure you and me and a lot of people immediately think of Tony the Tiger. I was amazed when we did that episode to learn that there was actually other mascots that Kellogg's used before there was ever a Tony the Tiger. But again, you come to find out, hey, the world existed long before we did.
Well, I used to be in a fairly popular band in LA back in the 80s. Called Tiger, and it was Tyger.
Yeah.
And during the time when the band had been through a lot of personnel changes and over the years, but there was a version of Tiger that I was part of. Towards the late 80s, because that was actually in Tiger when it was in its inception too.
Yeah.
But I wound up leaving, and then I wound up coming back, towards the late 80s. And the lead guitarist at that time was a guy named Tony. And of course, we all nicknamed him Tony the Tiger.
Well, there you go.
And actually, that was I think it was like around the mid 80s that I was in that band when somebody had written my name on a dry eraser board that we used for working on the material, writing down the arrangements of songs, so we could always use it as a reference when we're practicing and looking at it, because we would change things and we would use the board to remind us of the change and stuff like that. My name was on the board, and when somebody made a change, they actually erased the Y, and that's how I got tagged with the nickname Gar.
Wow. How cool is that? And wow. That is cool. Now, Gar, also to give people kind of a time frame when we're talking, we as we said, 1964, the movie was released on March 28th, 1964, and it has been described as a fantasy kind of comedy film. I think that's a fair description. Oftentimes you'll go see a movie, and you might see a movie like this and think, this really is fantasy. No way in hell somebody could really turn into a fish. But I think the fact that this was, and this kind of came to me in watching it last night, the fact that this is kind of maybe the first live-action / animated cartoon movie is that's why they're able to get away with something like this, because it does kind of take you into like a little bit of a fantasy world, and you see a lot of things like.
Wait a minute, a little bit?
Well, no, but
it takes you a lot.
Yeah, and that's that's the amazing thing, because even though, you might think initially, oh, yeah, no way in hell somebody could really turn it doesn't seem to matter, because it does take you to a place where maybe you want to go, or maybe you, like initially when you see the Don Knott's character, Henry Limpet, you think, oh man, this guy, he's got a humdrum life, he's kind of going nowhere in life, life maybe is kind of boring. I mean, for a good portion of the first half of the film, you almost think that his best friend is like kind of flirting with his wife, and the wife almost likes the best friend better, and he's talking about how great, he studies fish and how great the fish are, and you're like, oh, this guy really is boring,
Well, for me, as a child, I just, fell down the fantasy rabbit hole.
Sure.
When I watched this movie, because it was pure out and out fantasy at a time when all of that was at an apex in my life, because I was only 8 years old, and everybody, when you're at 8 years old, it's all about fantasy.
Yeah, and it's interesting they were able to accomplish that, being that this is supposed to, the movie itself is supposed to take place, in World War II, and so it's amazing they are able to have a movie about World War II, and kind of take you to almost, they do, as you say, not kind of, they take you to that fantasy world, and you kind of, for the hour and a half that the movie goes on, you kind of you're in that fantasy land, and you just believe. I mean, it was funny, even when his best friend, who thinks he witnessed Henry Limpet die, at Coney Island, thinks he drowned. He tried to save him. He's having a little bit of trouble at first believing. Oh, wait a minute, what am I seeing? But he kind of buys into it right away without much questioning.
Well, his best friend, Jack Weston.
That's the guy, the actor's name.
He's one of those lost people that was like all over the place in all kinds of TV shows, movies, and stuff like that. The guy was working all the time, and he's just another one of those lost people nowadays, and faded into the sunset. But at that time in the 60s, boy, he was a busy dude.
Yeah, and but yeah, it was funny when they think that they witnessed Henry Limpet drown at Coney Island. I mean, of course, there's a moment where they're sad and they're shocked, but it seemed like they kind of got over his death real quickly, or they just kind of got on with life, if you know what I mean.
Well, another thing is he's, it becomes this acceptable separation.
Yeah.
But, I just remember there was a lot of times in movies and things like that when you would have the main character that would be married,
mm-hmm.
but now he's sent somewhere else where he's got to do some heroic thing.
Yeah.
And when he's there, he's not with his wife, because he's being a hero.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden there becomes a different love interest.
Yeah.
As part of the movie, even though at home he's still married. What that tells you is monogamy was not very adhered to.
Yeah. And yet
during the, it was kind of this known thing that a lot of men cheated on their wives, and it became so acceptable that they infused it in movies and scripts, including Mr. Limpet.
Yeah. In fact, and at the same time, they have a scene in there where Henry Limpet almost his morality kind of comes out when the ladyfish and him start flirting with one another, and then he realizes, oh, wait a minute, ladyfish, I am married. I don't know if I can do this. I have to go talk to my wife, your wife, and then you realize it really is like two different worlds. Even when you see the closing scene, like people might think when they're seeing the film for the first time, okay, this is gonna somehow end happy, and he's gonna end up becoming a human again and go back to his old life. That's not actually what happens. Actually, what happens is he tells his wife, okay, I'm a fish now, and you go on with your life, and I'm gonna go on with my life. And he kind of tells her, and she just kind of accepts that she's married to a fish. Like, she's like, am I married? The line was something like, wait a minute, Henry, am I now the widow of a man, or am I the wife of a fish? And he's like, well, in a way, both.
Well, but it's just so weird because people forget about that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about monogamy.
Yeah.
And there was it's kind of one of those social time marking.
Sure.
I constantly through these time machine episodes talk about, because we go into different time periods,
sure.
and I like to reminisce so much that it also brings up some of these other things that are social differences, where at that time there was a certain amount of social acceptability of that.
Yeah, and it's amazing because of the animation and the mix, making it a live action movie and an animated cartoon. It just throughout the entire film, you're allowed to go to that fantasy world that they took you to throughout the entire film. And I mean, a great example of that is once they realize that the secret, I'm talking about the military people, they realize that the secret weapon is actually a fish. It used to be a man that turned into a fish or whatever. And there's really kind of, at first there's a little bit of hesitation, but then quickly, okay, well, we're just going to take advantage of this. We're going to use this so we can win the Nazis, so we can win the enemy. And I just love the fact that even me watching the movie as a viewer last night, and everybody in the film, you just kind of accept it for, okay, I'm willing to believe this. I'm willing to be entertained,
Well, yeah, and as a kid, boy, I just, like I said, I fell down the fantasy rabbit hole, with this one. And it's just, it really signifies that time period for me, because I just remember, the in awe as a child, watching the movie and having this, perspective at that time, because it's the first time I had ever seen anything like that. I had been watching cartoons.
Oh, sure.
But the first time I had seen where a cartoon was fused in with the movie and that whole kind of thing, and it was just, I was in awe.
Yeah, and what's funny is this was the last film that Warner Brothers Animation made before closing their studio doors. Last animated movie or whatever, but this is also, the technology is really amazing, and I'm surprised it's not used more often these days. I know these days they do more stuff with CG, computer generated stuff, but like the first movie they made like this, since Mr. Limpet, I think was came out around 1988 or 87, I think was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That was the first time, I think, since doing this, that somebody else had tried that technology in a motion picture.
And because the technology was so much more advanced when they did Roger Rabbit, that it just came out so good.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have a Roger Rabbit if you didn't have
sure.
a Mr. Limpet.
Sure, and also we should talk about some of the musical highlights of this. I mean, the very beginning, the main scene where you see him, I wish I were a fish, and then that song just breaks out, that musical part of the film. As a child, you just start, or even as an adult last night, I just broke out into song and started singing along, It's if you notice, when
you watch Disney movies,
sure.
they always break into the song
sure.
routines and stuff like that. So, it's kind of, one of those staples.
Yeah.
For that kind of stuff. At that time period, and it was also at the height of the popularity of musicals too, for the rest of movies that were being released at the time too. Rarely nowadays, I haven't seen a musical release in quite a while. I mean, it's probably been 10, 20 years.
Yeah, probably.
Since I've seen a musical. Musicals have gone way, way down in popularity, and I have to admit, even as a child, I was never really into musicals. I couldn't stand watching serious dialogue where people are talking about like a serious subject, and then all of a sudden they break into a song.
Yeah.
To me, it just, I love music, and I love, I bleed music in my DNA.
Sure.
But musicals, nah.
What about this movie though? Like in those two parts I'm talking about. The I Wish I Were a Fish, and because again, and then there's one I think I posted on the Facebook page. Super Duper Yankee Doodle or something like that, where he dreams about being a hero and he's up on Mount Rushmore with all the other presidents, and he sings like this patriotic song. I mean, I like that for a lot of reasons. So the fact that this is not something like what you're talking about, where talking about something serious, was it a little different for you because of that?
No, it's pretty much the same.
Okay, interesting, yeah. Because I bring that up only because that was my reaction. It's all right, you have a dip. But what I was noticing when I was looking for stuff, and doing the research, I went on YouTube, typed in The Incredible Mr. Limpet, see what would come up, and some of like the thing with I Wish I Were a Fish, the song for that part of a movie came up, and I couldn't believe it got over like something like 5K hits that people were just that one song checking out. So I tell you that a lot of people like that, and as you say, Gar, just because a lot of people like it doesn't mean we have to like it, because everybody's going to have a different reaction when they see this film. I mean, depending on person's age. I mean, I think of a teenager seeing The Incredible Mr. Olympic, you might get people that love it, and you're going to get a certain people saying stuff like, "Oh well, the CG stuff they have now is way advanced in that." But again, in doing a show on kind of the history of these films. And what the technology was. You got to look at the evolution of everything, and you say, well, okay, the way they made cartoons in 1964 is vastly different. But you got to start from somewhere and kind of this is the history of it, Well,
but everybody's got their own cup of tea.
Yeah, and that's all right.
Some people are going to like what you're alluding to. Some people are going to love it. Some people are going to hate it. Some people are going to be in the middle. But and that's the thing. That I've learned over the years is just because I like it doesn't mean that everybody else isn't going to like it.
Yeah,
and what that has led me to adopt is this. I don't know. I think there's a better description, but I'll use tolerance.
Sure.
There's an accepted. I think it's a better word. Accepted. That just because I don't like it doesn't mean that everybody else shouldn't like it.
Exactly.
Just because I love it doesn't mean that everybody else should love it.
You're given.
And I accept. Easily accept. That if I loved something and another person really didn't care for it, hey, I'm supportive of that other person. There's a lot of people that I've run across over the years that if I say, if they say, oh, I particularly love this particular thing, and I say, well, that's not my cup of tea. they react very negative to it. It's like either you're with me or you're against me.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of attitude, and that's a black and white world that person lives in. And we live in a world that has a lot of gray areas.
Yeah,
and I'm acceptive of the gray areas.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Oh, sure.
And just because I like it and somebody else doesn't like it, hey, I support that too.
Yeah, yeah.
I really think that this either you're with me or against me is a horrible stance.
Me too. I mean, and I respect, and I'm the same way. I respect the fact that that we can do the show and have a difference of opinion, because, like you said, everybody's got a right to their opinion. And I have respect for people. Like I would rather be real and tell people this is what I think. And if you don't agree, that's fine too, like you said, Gar. But we're here to give you our opinion. I would rather be honest than go along with the crowd just for the hell of it, And one more thing, just to kind of give people a time frame of what was going on in the world in 1964, as we like to do so much. I was reading that in 1964 that both the Beatles made their very first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, and that was, as we talked many times before, that was a huge moment in pop culture history. Same year, when they first came to the United States in 1964 for the first time, they had their first #1 hit, Gar, with the song "I Want to Hold Your Hand."
Well, I've said it in many time machine episodes before, and I'll say it again. That people, younger generations that were not around at that time, just have absolutely no idea how huge the popularity of the Beatles were at that time, and the huge anticipation that was in America at that time, because I was actually in 1965 or 1964. My mom had family in Georgia.
Wow.
And we took a train across America to go visit our family in Georgia. And when I was in Georgia was when the actual big anticipation, they had not come here yet, and the anticipation was just incredible, because I'm visiting my cousins that I had never met before, and one of the first things that they start talking about to me and my sister was this anticipation. Oh my God, the Beatles are coming to America.
Wow.
The Beatles are coming to America. It was just this huge anticipation, and it was before they even came.
Yeah. I mean, I've read and seen stuff about that. It was just such a huge, and at the same time, I think the Beach Boys were pretty big. They've been around for a few years, and it was almost like the Beatles were, as American as apple pie. And the Beatles, although it's different types of music, were constantly being compared at the time, I've read, to the Beach Boys.
Well, in 1964, they eclipsed
the Beach Boys.
The Beach Boys.
Sure.
I mean, they cast a huge shadow over the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
And of course, it was a competition at the time.
Yeah.
And there was a huge competition between the Beach Boys and the Beatles ever since.
Oh, sure.
The Beatles would do this, and then the Beach Boys would try to come out with theirs that would compete with it. Like, say, Sgt. Pepper's and Pet Sounds.
There you go.
That is the classic historic comparison between the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and still the Sgt. Pepper's overshadowed Pet Sounds.
Sure, I mean,
but what it did, and people forget about this, the Beatles brought out the best in the Beach Boys.
Oh, sure, and a whole lot of that has to do with the fact that there was a little bit about America versus the Brits going on, and again, I got to tell you, Gar, I've been wanting to do an episode on the incredible Mr. Limpet for a while, and I was so happy when you agreed you wanted to do it. But when I started to do a research the other day for this episode, I was a little worried because I was able to find enough material to do a show on, but I was surprised how there wasn't a ton of information about the history of it. And yet, I think part of the reason this show is coming out so good today is because, once again, as you like to say, the passion is coming out. I mean, the fact that I watched a movie last night, and so taking my reaction and your reaction from the movie, let me ask you, did you get a chance to watch the movie, or in preparation for this, or has it been a while since you've seen it?
Well, it's been a while. I didn't, but I was moving.
And yet,
everything was upside down, and
that's fine.
I just kind of got set. I'm still actually, I still have to go to my old place and pick up some more stuff and bring it over to the new place.
That's amazing.
Things
wow.
that I left behind that I didn't put in the moving truck.
Gar,
and I go, well, I can come back and get it. So I'm actually still in the process of moving.
Gar, that's amazing because I tell you, I was a little worried that I wasn't able to. I didn't think I was able to come up with enough information, but we did the episode, and I think the part of the reason this show's coming to my mind be such a great episode is that we both still have such a passion in talking about this film. Like you said, many great childhood memories. I mean, I kind of been watching it for the first time last night in many years. I took me back to my childhood. I mean, I had many of the same reactions, and so it's funny that we're able to still do an episode, even though I wasn't able to find a ton of information, just based on that passion for the film. It's coming out.
Well, another kind of historic things that were also happened at that time, lost in the shuffle, is the first. Space. I don't know. They shot this
movie.
No. It was. I don't know if NASA existed at the time, but we did have a space program at the time, and they shot a space probe. That's the word that I was. They shot a space probe to Mars.
Yes.
And it actually launched in 1964. It arrived. It took about a year for the probe to actually get there, but that was a first. Because up until 1964, every foray that we had done was just into the Earth's atmosphere, and this was a really big step. In the space program that also happened in 1964. Muhammad Ali was fighting under his original name, Cassius Clay.
There you go. Yeah.
Back at that time, and he had won the heavyweight championship by beating Sonny Liston.
Yes.
And that happened in 1964. The Vietnam War was in full swing, at the time, and there was also the there was also I have to bring this up because
yes.
It's hard for me to imagine because I live in Southern California, which is a earthquake haven.
Sure.
I have, for me, because I live here and I've been through so many earthquakes. The first earthquake that I experienced was back in 1971, the Sylmar earthquake. Wow. But the most powerful earthquake ever recorded was recorded in 1964. And the earthquake happened in Alaska. And, if you look up pictures, Yeah, this earthquake registered 9.4.
Wow. Wow.
Think about that.
Oh, I'm thinking about it.
Every earthquake, the most powerful earthquake I had ever experienced was 7.1, which was the Silmar earthquake.
Sure.
And 9.4, that is huge compared to 7.1.
Sure.
When you look at pictures of the destruction that happened, at that time, it's really eye-popping.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I highly recommend anybody just to get a grasp of the kind of destruction of a 9.4 earthquake.
Wow.
It's pretty incredible. And there was also the Northridge earthquake that was really powerful. And the Northridge earthquake had even more damage occur than the 1971 because everything was built up so much more. When the Silmar earthquake happened.
Oh wow!
So there was a lot more damage that occurred. I remember driving out to Northridge and seeing the damage, and it literally looked like a war zone.
Yeah. Wow. And again, in talking about Mr. Limpet, the amazing thing is, again, it's supposed to take place during World War II. And it takes us on this kind of interesting fantasy where how much, when you're watching the film, Gar, do you remember, how much do you really think, those are real warships and this is really taking place during the war? I was convinced, and yet at the same time, love the fact that the secret weapon was a fish. Let's talk about, too, the fact his friend, the other fish, Ladyfish, the Henry Limpet's new love interest, if you will. Right away we can tell that, okay, that's a female fish and that's the ladyfish. And what did you think about the ladyfish and the little kind of romantic interest there?
Well, it just kind of goes back to the whole monogamy.
Yeah.
Because it really kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot as to where that, if they're using that element in a movie, there's only one reason why they would allow, because it's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
But the mid-1960s was way more conservative.
Sure.
At that time, and to think that cheating on your wife
was acceptable.
Was acceptable during such a hugely conservative time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like it really kind of boggles the mind.
Yeah.
How okay, we're conservative. Okay, this is acceptable though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was kind of an under the radar acceptable. People didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a cavalier accepting. It was actually, it was like you talked about it under your breath. And this is also a same time period where I remember as a child, my parents had difficulty saying the word pregnant.
Yeah.
In front of me as a child.
That goes back. Gar
struggled with that.
Gar,
I remember it. It was a moment that I remember as a child.
That was alive and
if it's so unacceptable to say the word pregnant, but yet at the same time it's acceptable to cheat on your wife.
Yeah, Gar, that goes back, even it was prevalent in the 70s. Like, you go back watching old episodes of All in the Family, and Archie used to tell his, meathead son-in-law, hey, don't say pregnant in front of Edith. She's with, talking about his daughter. She's not pregnant. She's with child. Watch your mouth in front of your mother-in-law.
Yes. Yes, and it's just that's one of these things about
the time period.
Watching these movies is it really gives you these indications of social shifts.
Oh yeah, and again, this is supposed to be a movie about World War II, and I think a lot of people experience what I did last night watching the film again. I'm more concentrated on the fish throughout the whole movie and all his little underwater friends and Krusty the Krab and all that and Ladyfish than I am on the whole plot of it during World War II. And what's interesting about it is the movie actually is made, comes out in 1964, about 20-something years after the war. So there's that, and the guy who wrote the original story was based on this novel by this guy, Theodore Pratt. He was a guy from Florida, and so he wrote over 30 books, Gar, and out of those 30 books, five of them were turned into movies. So that tells you this guy's a pretty good writer. 5 of his books were turned into, and all the stories he told were kind of based on stuff that happened in Florida.
And nobody knows who he is today.
Yeah. Isn't that a shame? And
it's just that's just one of these things that all my life, as a young boy, all of these things that were really popular in generations before me were still popular when I was a young boy. So I got to experience a lot of these things that were even before my own time period that I really latched onto. And then later on in life, these other things that you wind up latching onto, but here's Don Knott at that time period was so popular that he was. There's not many people that successfully transitioned from TV to the movies at that time. And that's another thing that only if you were living at that time did you know this. Mm-hmm. Because at that time, in the mid-1960s, TV actors did not transition into movie. It was an anomaly. It was extremely rare, and it just didn't happen. And there was a lot of actors that tried unsuccessfully.
And he was one of the first that was able to actually first do it. And you got to look at the fact that it's interesting. As funny as he was as Barney Fife on Andy Griffith, I don't think a lot of people took him serious as an actor until he left Andy Griffith Show and started making movies and was the not just some dumb bubbling sidekick, but the actual featured actor in the films. Mr. Limpet is a film that kind of kicked off his movie career. I think of other great movies that we're probably going to do episodes on down the line, such as Gus. That was a Disney movie with the horse, and then of course stuff like The Love God, the Ridiculous Astronaut, or something like, I forget what it was called, but he did all these great movies. Shakiest Gun in the West.
Well, can I bring up one?
Sure.
Because man, this one was just as impactful for me as a child. The Ghost and Mr. Chicken.
There you go. That's it too. Yes.
I highly recommend to anyone that listens to this episode of the Time Machine, yes, absolutely, experience the Ghost and Mr. Chicken, but you would really be doing yourself a disservice if you don't also include the Ghost and Mr. Chicken, because man, that it has so many elements that I think that people will still enjoy today.
Oh, sure, and that's why I say, Gar, I'm going to go on record say that we're going to do future episodes on some of these movies we've just mentioned, because they were just that great that they deserve an episode. And before kind of wrapping up today's episode, I want to say, too, that even when Don Knott got to the point in his movie career where people thought it had kind of dried up and he wasn't as popular as he once was. I mean, he took a little bit of a break from the business, but then again in the 80s, as we know, he kind of got a second kick to his career when he comes on Three's Company, the TV show, as a lovable Ralph Furley. Kind of a...
I remember when the Ropers left Three's Company, and I was wondering if the show, because they were such
a big part
of Three's Company, they were a huge element to the show's storylines and everything. And I was really wondering, how things were going to turn out, post the Ropers. And I cannot say enough good things about what Don Knott brought to that character, Mr. Furley.
And I
absolutely love Mr. Furley. He was great on that show. And he, as one person, he was powerhouse enough to replace two people.
Yeah, because again, I think that they had given him another actress come on and play the part of Ralph Furley's wife, it would have been seen as trying to copy the Ropers. But he was strong enough in his talent that he did not need that. And see, that's the interesting thing. I think Ralph Furley's kind of a combination of Barney Fife and the Love God. I say that because if you look at all the episodes he did on Three's Company, he's kind of this character that he thinks he's a real great ladies man, and he really doesn't have a clue, and if you look at the
those loud shirts that you used to wear,
the loud colors,
my God, they're priceless.
Yeah, and the loud colors. Like I remember one episode, Jack is Mr. Furley's supposed to have gone away for a week, and then Jack promises, I'll feed your turtle, Mr. Furley. He's trying to use the apartment downstairs to have a date, and then Mr. Furley comes back early. Oh, who's this, Jack? You're with a girl. What's going on here? And then, she's an interior decorator, and she just loves what you've done to your apartment. Oh, really? And just like even between him and John Ritter, the scenes they would have together, it was like you said, it was priceless. And the thing about the character of Ralph Furley, that was successful too, because a lot of the scenes that he was in, he would do that thing with his face and his eyes would kind of bug out, and that became kind of a trademark of that character that people came to love. So by the time he's having a pick up in his career on Three's Company, I mean people are loving him just for his physical comedy alone.
Oh, he was great. And Three's Company, is one of those shows. It's the most popular episode of The Time Machine.
Amazing, yeah. I was going to say.
And I think that we did touch on Mr. Furley when we did the episode.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we really gave him the kind of credit.
Yeah.
That
he deserves.
This is our opportunity
to
in
do
this
that
episode.
Yeah.
To give him really the credit he's due, because man, the guy, you think about it, he rose to stardom during a time when it was all about the beautiful people in Hollywood, which him rising to stardom in the middle of all that was an anomaly.
Sure.
The fact that he became the star of a show that wasn't even named after him.
Yeah.
And people were tuning into the show not because of Andy Griffith, but because of Barney Fife.
Yeah.
And then he turns around and he becomes one of the first actors to successfully transition from TV to the movies, which was a huge anomaly. It just didn't happen, and everybody that tried always tried unsuccessfully. And then he gets a completely second career as Mr. Furley. These are all things that he did against the odds.
Yeah, and again, not the greatest not the greatest looking movie star, but he was able to be successful in spite of it. Why? Because that was a true test, I think, that he had the talent that he had. That's why he had such a lasting, even up until the time he died, people were still talking about Don Knotts, you know. And I got to close this, Gar, today with this, because I found it, in regards to the guy that directed the film, his name was Arthur Lubin, and I bring him up because he had directed several other now classic films, such as several Abbott and Costello movies. And I thought you'd be interested in this. He worked on the 1943 Phantom of the Opera film, and get this, he created the talking horse for the Mr. Ed TV series.
You know, which in turn, you know, I mean, people, that's another one of those
landmark,
hugely popular shows in the 60s that nobody even, it's not even on the radar. It's not even a blip anymore.
Yeah.
But Mr. Ed was a hugely popular show about a talking horse.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, and think about that.
Yeah.
Think about that, because that would never happen nowadays.
I mean, if they tried to approach some studio with that, you know, today it'd be like, oh, who's going to tune in for 30 minutes to watch a talking horse? Right. Yeah.
Well, at the same time, you know, this is the black and white period of TV.
Yeah.
There was also another show that was real popular during that time, Dobie Gillis.
Yes.
Nobody knows anything about Dobie Gillis anymore. It's just so faded. But that's where John Denver got his start.
Oh wow! And Gar, I was reading that the actress that did the voice of Ladyfish, she was apparently big on TV back in the 60s as well. And one of the things she was known for was playing the part of Gomer Pyle's girlfriend.
Wow! Did not know that.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of doing this show, you know.
Well, Gar,
we all come up with these things, you know.
It's
so awesome
to do this
and find out new things.
I mean, another great show in the can, and I say that because, like I said, Gar, and wrapping this up for today, finally, when I seen how little information I was able to come up on the movie, I kind of questioned, wow, I wonder what the show's going to be like. But because we did what we did, we still did the research, we were able to use what we came up with, and there was just such a passion we both had for the movie. I think it came out in today's episode.
Yes, I can't say enough about, as a child, I was just mesmerized by by the movie. It was just I willingly was diving into lake fantasy.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. And to end it in a word, groundbreaking.
Yes, it was a groundbreaking movie. There's a lot of people that really don't know all of the different elements that were first started in this movie that we have to thank, for the makers of this movie. We now have them to thank, because there are things that we would not have today had they not gone out on a limb and made the movie.
Yeah, I just, like you said, Gar, we want to tip our hat with this episode to the legendary, late and great Don Knotts, because to this day, he's one of my all-time favorite comedic actors, and I want to thank him for the great body of work he left behind. His legacy is alive and well, even though he's not. And you know what? May Don Knotts rest in peace. I mean, I was reading that if he'd still been alive today, he'd be like over 100 years old. Just think about that.
Well, I can't say enough about him. He was a very large part of my childhood.
So true.
You're going all the way back to the Andy Griffith Show. It's just, just like you, I have to tip my hat to him. The man, carved out a career that, had to be extremely difficult to do that carving.
Yeah.
You know, because he was swimming against the current.
Sure. And that's why I think The Incredible Mr. Limpet, it's amazing that was his first feature film. He swam along all through that film, and he did it better than I think anybody anticipated he would.
Yes.
Well,
see the movie, but also The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. Oh my God! It's just I guarantee you that if anybody gives it Ghost and Mr. Chicken a chance, you're still gonna love it because it has the whole Halloween element to it, and I just remember it as a child. I loved it.
Well, Gar,
I didn't like it. I loved it.
Gar, I'm going to give you a little bit of anticipation here because I think you gave me a great idea to do a Halloween episode coming up in the next few months. So we will think about that.
Yes.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.